Thanks, Bill, and I appreciate everybody joining in tonight. It looks like we got about just shy of 30 guys. So I'll try to go through the slide deck quickly. You'll see the title is Game Management and Communication. This deck was made by Joey Harrington and I. We used it last year, and this year Joey is busy, so I'll be taking up his portion of the brief. For everybody that's present, the assumptions for this brief are pretty simple. NFHS rules, trying to do a regular season game, 3-man crew, everybody's fully qualified to officiate. And note, if you want to discuss an NCAA type game situation, either from a game management or a communication perspective, just please state that in your question and we'll go from there. Hopefully we'll only have me talking for about 20 minutes and then we'll have a bunch of time for questions and answers. So everybody has a different definition of game management, but essentially it's something pretty simple. It's the steps you take before and during a game to make sure that there's a smooth and efficient flow of the game. Game management is something that benefits all the coaches, players, and crew. You're not going to find a game management book out there anywhere. You essentially gather it through years of experience or games of experience. I want everybody to know that these elements on game management are recommendations. They're not prescriptive in nature. They are not rules or mechanics. You can add your own steps and delete some of mine if they don't work for you. And primarily, game management is a skill that's based on experience. And you gather your game management skills through the school of hard knocks or the school of experience or the school of wisdom by running a lot of games but with people like Bill Dorsey, which I've had the pleasure of doing. Moving right into the game management start, it's preparation for the game. Physically, are you ready to rumble? Are you ready to run? Different guys have different pregame rituals. So as if you are the R, I always try to take guys' different pregame rituals into account to include their time to stretch and prep before we enter the field of play. On the mental perspective, I always take the time to contact the home administration to include the head coach if it's necessary, especially on those days where there's going to be bad weather. And then personally, I always have to ask myself, what frame of mind am I in? Are you in the right spot for tonight's game? I try to do a little bit of pregame intelligence on the teams. Are you confident with your rules knowledge and make sure that you know the differences between NFHS and NCAA? And we often talk about those in the pregame. And then I always try to arrive prepared and in a positive state of mind. And that's easier stated than done, quite honestly, in the Washington, D.C. area, primarily because of traffic, but because of other stressors in the area. And you guys all know that, Marty and the team, Bob Manfuso may ask you to do an afternoon game, and then you'll be quickly driving to an evening game. And what I always try to say to myself as I'm getting out of the car is kind of take a few minutes to compartmentalize and try to remember that the game is about the players and the head coach, and it's not about the officiating crew. But as officiating crew, I always try to call the game fairly, do my best to provide for the safety of the players. And then my final thing is I always try to have fun with the crew that I'm running with. Pre-game with the crew is very important. The R sets the tone for the entire evening. And I always think of if you invest time in a good pregame, chances are you're going to have a pretty good night, I think, because it's the key ingredient for good game management. You tell your team what you expect and what you can do as the R, and also you explain to them what some of your limitations are. So I try to dedicate 30 minutes to my pregame with the crew, and then 30 minutes on the field doing other game management functions that we'll talk about here shortly. So you enter the facility, and I always take a hard look at the field and facility, try to manage and eliminate any variables. Traditionally, we neglect this a bit, but I try to pay particular attention to the center line and all lines on the field, the box, the bench areas. And some schools just put the benches very, very close to the box and never move them. And I, as an official, the closer the benches are to the box, the traditionally bad things happen. So I make sure that the benches are in their proper position. And of course, we check the goals. I always ask the home head coach if there's anything unique about the field, and it'll amaze you what he'll tell you. Sometimes there will be surprises, and if you don't ask, he may forget to tell you. If something's not right before the game, of course, pregame is the time to fix it. And then I wanted to cover this one because I've had this happen to me 3, 4, 5 times over the year. If there's a unique situation that's occurring at the field, pregame is the time to take care of that unique situation. So a few examples. If you have somebody that's got an annoying noisemaker, and that annoying person is sitting behind the visiting team bench, you owe it to the visiting team head coach to eliminate that distraction. Also had a playoff game last year where you could see that a huge student section was assimilating right behind the visiting team bench. And sure enough, the visiting team head coach came up to me and said, "I don't think that's going to work out well." And I said, "I agree with you." So we took actions to make sure that this large student section was positioned behind the home team, not positioned behind the visiting team. And then also, if you find any ill-behaved humans on the field, and this can be anything from photographers to people who are on the playing surface, it's probably better to take care of this situation before the game so that you're not distracted by it during the game. And over the years, I've had tons of stories by guys in our association, photographers that just would not get out of the box, photographers that were a pain in the ass, parents on the far side of the field who didn't belong there. We have a bunch of funny stories that I won't bore you with on a Sunday evening, but you want to take care of these unique situations before the game starts. Players inspection, I don't go looking for trouble, but you want to do some good proactive or preemptive officiating. These are traditionally the areas that we've seen over the year. Eye black is always an issue, weird uniform issues. And if a coach takes the time to point something out to you, he's trying to help you out. So if a kid has something very odd about his uniform, resolve it prior to game time so it doesn't become an issue during the game. If the players ask you to check their sticks, I do them just like a game check. So I try to check the kid's entire equipment suite, and my partners, I ask them to do the same thing. Proactive pregame officiating should prevent any complications later, especially with regards to equipment. Time elements in an ideal world, like I stated earlier, I try to set aside 30 minutes for a pregame in a quiet place. And then 30 minutes prior to game time is when I try to be on the field. And I try to dedicate 10 minutes for the coaches, 10 minutes for the captains and the Fogos, and then 10 minutes for the table and the crew and my crew. The biggest one that I often find myself pinched for time is the table. And these are typically volunteers, sometimes young men or young women who don't really have a lot of background in the game. And just the 10 minutes you invest in the people will pay huge dividends during the game and make your game management that much easier. Obviously, by giving yourself more time, you eliminate more potential problem areas. And again, for me, the goal is I want to eliminate all the variables so that during the content of the game, I'm just concentrating on the players, on the head coaches, and on my team, including my fellow officials and the team at the table. Spending time with the coaches pregame, your relationship with the head coach begins here. I always try to assume a position of respect. I always try to engage with positive communication, so we'll talk about that. When I walk up to the head coach, I always remove my cap and I shake the gentleman's hand. Things that I recommend covering, of course, the game cards, the certifications, any unique situation. I always want to make sure I know who's calling timeouts for that team. Most of the time, the head coach says, it's only me, right? So during the conduct of the game, if one of his assistant coaches yells for a timeout, I don't give it to him. If I have a head coach who tells me, John, I'm the only one calling timeouts tonight, that's my contract with him. And then I allow the head coach to ask any questions. I think it's important to state here, I've often been the you or the field judge, and the head coach will look at me and ask me a question. That is not the time for me to answer the question. The questions should always be deferred to the referee, and I always do defer them to my referee. It's not my place to speak up when a head coach asks a question pregame. I always subordinate myself to the R, and the R answers the questions. So just a little formality there, but I think it's an important thing to be a good U or a good FJ and not usurp the referee's authority with a head coach. Spending time with the captains and Pocos, I always shake their hands and I ask them to remove their gloves. I always be professional with these young men. I do talk sportsmanship with the captains, but I try not to preach to them. The Fogos might ask questions, so be prepared with the correct answers, which means you really have to know that portion of the rule book in section 4, or excuse me, rule 4 about face-offs and everything about face-offs. You don't ever want to find yourself making stuff up. And I always have to tell myself to be mindful of their time because their head coach or their assistant coaches are waiting for them. So I try to do this expeditiously and efficiently with the players. Spending time at the table, we talked about, I always worry about it. It's the most neglected part of my game. They are a key part of the team. To include the person up running the clock, it's good to have them down at the table and talk to them. I always try to find the home team leader, which is usually a very mature young lady who works for the head coach. I want to make sure that all those elements of the home team equipment are present. I cover the penalties with them, personals and technicals particularly, our hand signals. I ask them to do specific release techniques so that both head coaches can hear them. I cover the double horn situations with them. And I always tell them, hey, if somebody's giving you a hard time about the score, the official score is always on the back of my card. And then most important, I thank them. They're very integral portions of every game. And it's just a nice way to start the night. I have some historical examples where there have been problems with the score, with the time, with penalty time, and with people assisting at the table, and maybe we'll get into that during some of the questions and answer periods. For the lineup, I just do it right. Make sure the in-home player is actually present. Make it quick and concise. Introduce yourself and your partners. Make a brief remark. Get the goalies through the shoot and make sure that they shake hands with their opponents. This is a good time to watch how both teams interact and the respect they have for each other, or in some cases, the lack of respect they have for each other. You can gather a lot on how your night's going to go with both of these teams during the lineup. In-game management, we've had a ton of training on this. Use sound mechanics and your rules knowledge. Depend on your training. I try to always hark on be professional in everything we do, but also be confident. If you find yourself yelling during the conduct of the game, that's a signal for me that I'm not doing a good job if my voice is elevated. So that's a little internal metric on my own part. I try to focus on the players on the field, focus on the head coaches, and always reinforce your officiating crew because you're a team. I never engage with folks who detract from the game. So that means anybody outside the playing surface, anybody who might be down on the playing surface, but outside, the 6 yards, it might be a photographer, it might be somebody who's just crazy, it might be a reporter. And then I try to always remember, be positive because it's supposed to be fun, right? And that'll take you a long way into the night. Post game with the crew, once the game is over, you want to get off the field. You want to make sure you do a post game with your crew. As the R, ask the UNFJ about the mistakes or any confusion that you may have caused during the night. The entire crew should take away lessons learned. I try to get better for the next time I'm out. I do have a little notebook in my car, and I spend a few minutes writing notes down. I don't just dump that game and move on to the next one, because there are lessons learned in every game. And then I try to text or follow up with the crew on the next day if it's warranted. And then, of course, you have your responsibilities to Marty and Rob and Bob Manfuso to fill out the game reports and also any ejection reports. And the ejection reports have to be done quickly, as do the game reports. And I'm notoriously bad at this. Now I'm moving away from game management and into communication. The thing that I would say is there are many ways that we communicate on the field, right? There, spoken words, our official lacrosse signals, the body language that we demonstrate on the field, any facial expressions, and essentially communication begins and ends when we enter the field all the way through us leaving the playing facility. So anything we do or don't do is going to be evaluated and probably recorded in the memory of the head coach, if not some other officials and staff at the school. So the only thing I would share here is I try to remember that everything matters, and respect and professionalism goes a long way. Moving on to Joey's slides, and to give Joey the footnote here, this is the elements of basic communication all of us should be covering down on. The pregame with the crew, the coaches, the captains, and the scorers table, we kind of really already talked about. What's important is the pregame really sets the tone for the night. During the game, as a crew, we should remain connected, right? We're all on the same piece of turf. We want to make sure that we're talking with each other, either via our signals or verbally, and that we're on a string, we're on a good string. If somebody's officiating behind the cage, as the single side, you want to make sure you tell your partner, hey, I'm covering down, I got the cage. So crew communication is vital. Crew communication, of course, is also vital during key moments in the game, such as face-offs, setting the field after a penalty has been assigned, or anytime you have a serious penalty or foul. The communication during the game with the players, different officials in our association have different ways of handling this. They'll talk to you about it in the pregame. I try to respect, obviously, the players and the head coach and the assistant coaches and everything that I do, but I often refer to the players simply by their number. And I'll say, hey, number 8, how's your evening going? And he'll say, sir, it's going well. And I just call the players by the number. Some guys will know a player and refer to him by their first name. But also I try to minimize my communications with the players because personally, I focus in on other areas. I want to make sure that I'm managing the game well. I want to make sure that we're moving on with the play of the game. But it's also fine for you to talk to the players in a comfortable fashion if you enjoy talking to the players. With the coaches, you're going to get to the point where talking to the head coach is the most important thing you're doing in the evening. So it's important to provide the information he wants and answer his reasonable questions. We already talked about basic communication post-game, which is get your group together, get your equipment at the table, and it's now our standard, get off the field and then review the game with the crew in a private part of the parking lot or wherever you go post-game. Let's talk real quickly about mandatory communication. This is when you really have to talk to both coaches, okay? You don't want to be a shadow out there. If you have a big penalty, some type of ejection, you're going to have to move forward, probably as the R, but potentially as a F or UJ, and explain the situation and give an explanation of simply what you saw. This is not the time that you want to be ad hoc with your words or informal with your words. It's a serious point in the game, and you should be concise and precise in what you tell them. At the same time, if there's a big hit, but you believe it's a legal hit, and you pass on the call, chances are one of the coaches, probably the head coach, is going to ask you about it. I would just recommend. We have a lot of guys who played the game, and now we have a ton of guys who have officiated the game and have a ton of experience. Simply tell them what you saw. Hey, coach, I saw the hit. It was squarely in the chest, and in accordance with the rule book, it was a legal hit. That's all you have to say. Other types of mandatory communication, if there's something unique or confusing happening on the field, take your time and do it right. So let's take a look at some of those situations. If there's multiple fouls, right, this is the time to slow the game down. Be clear of the table and coaches on who's going in the box, what penalty time they're serving, and what the strengths of each teams are, right? If there's an official error, whether it's an inadvertent whistle, inadvertent flag, or something else, this is not the time to do a quick restart. You want to take the time to explain to the head coaches what took place and then get the game started in an efficient manner. Alternate possessions are always strange times. You want to explain this when you can. Hey, coach, the ball went out of bounds. The ball went out of bounds on a face-off. We could not determine who it went off of, and the ball was out beyond the defensive area lines. So by rule, that's alternate possession, and first alternate possession goes to blue. And that's all you have to say, right? Explain the situation as best you can. Unexpected calls. Let's say the ball's going out of bounds, and just in the last second, you have a guy who pushes or a guy who holds and brings a guy down to the deck. If somebody expected the ball to be red and now it's going to be white because of that unexpected technical foul, take the time, call that clearly, and just say, hey, we had a push over here on the sideline. The ball's going white, right? So that everybody understands who's getting the ball and what's transpired. Quickly on voluntary communication, assistant coaches. I used to always say to the head coach, hey, coach, you're responsible for your assistant coaches this evening. I will not probably talk to them throughout the course of the game. This year, I'm going to change that. I'm just going to say, sir, you're the head coach. You're responsible for the conduct of your assistant coaches. And I've kind of turned a different leaf on this. You can often cool things down a little bit by not only talking to the head coach, but occasionally just talking to an assistant coach during a break in the game. You shouldn't make it a habit, but often I will say you will find that there are teams that have multiple assistant coaches. One of those assistant coaches will be the alpha male, right? But he's going to be a good person. He's probably going to be the assistant coach who's running the box. I used to, say I'm going to minimize my time talking to those guys. Over the years, what I've found is talking to those guys and making them an ally of yours for the evening pays off, especially in and around the box. So I used to take a hard line as assistant coaches. My hard line is softening. I don't spend extended periods of time with assistant coaches, but I also treat them with respect because most of them aren't making a whole lot of money and they're spending time developing young men. Players, I try to minimize my time talking with players, but I want to make sure that the administration of the game is effective and keeping the game moving. And then other voluntary communication. If there's an unsportsmanlike conduct penalty or an unsportsmanlike conduct event, What you want to do is separate the players and hopefully keep it down to just one unsportsmanlike conduct penalty or event. Don't let it become two by agitating the players that are already agitated. So try to cool the situation down, try to use your negotiation skills to make sure that the kid is calming down, and then get him into the penalty box as quickly as possible. So hopefully it's just one unsportsmanlike and we can continue with the game. There are going to be times where you don't want to enter into a discussion, especially if it's going to make things worse, right? So this is just, if the assistant coaches become overbearing, right, manage the situation through the head coach. If you have an overly emotional coach, if you can, delay the conversation and then let his emotions burn out. What I always tell is I never let an emotional coach or even an emotional assistant coach delay the game, right? That's not what we're into. Give them a quick, concise description of what you saw, and then get back in the game. And then let's quickly talk about fans. Utilize the school staff. We don't need more trouble. A few years ago, we had guys who the fans did some bad things after the game, and they did the exact right thing to do. They just walked away from them. And then it was taken care of by the school staff. Again, try to eliminate variables for you for the rest of the night. For a summary on the communication side, you will find yourself in a negotiation or potentially in a confrontation. It doesn't come naturally to many of us. You can practice when it's easy, when a game is calm. You can actually talk to a coach and ask him what he liked, what he didn't like. But eventually, you're going to have to talk to a head coach when it's uncomfortable. And my recommendation there is, again, remain professional, remain positive. Tell the coach what you saw, but don't be overly verbose and don't stay there, right? Take the time to explain it and then get back into the game. Pay attention to what the coach's reaction may be. He may be fully satisfied, and you'll be surprised at the fact that you gave him his 10 seconds, and now he's positive for the rest of the night. And then the other thing is we have a varied and diverse group of officials in WALOA. I always watch for some of my partners, and I try to make their success part of my own habit pattern. A smile goes a long way. A positive attitude goes a long way. What doesn't go a long way is an aggressive attitude, kind of a less than empathetic attitude. And if you're kind of disrespectful and you ever tell coach, hey, coach, if you ever show a coach the hand, right, that's not going to be a good evening. So ultimately, trust with the head coaches requires familiarity, and familiarity comes through reps and tons of games. So it's just fun. It's part of negotiating. It's part of talking, which is a big part of your job as an official. That's probably longer than I wanted to go, Marty, but I'll open it up to questions.
All right, thanks, Pappy. We've had some good stuff, I think, pop up in the chat. Just to recap some of the stuff that's been mentioned. I'm talking about, I had put a note in here that make sure that we do remember to check those lines before the JV game, and that way you kind of avoid any of those uncomfortable situations in the varsity game. And that's a good way to establish that communication. And then Steve, I believe, brought up that make sure you do identify where that game manager is, because sometimes it's a little difficult, right? Some of the schools will have multiple events going on at the same time, and there'll be one game manager that will handle all of them. Most of the time, if you need somebody, you can find the athletic trainer that has a radio, and that athletic trainer can get you to the correct person who can change what needs to be changed. All right, so that's a good one. Then we had some comments in. All right, PD don't preach. All right. Certainly was talking about, I think his primary point was the way you present yourself. Okay. The way you present yourself really sets the tone for for the evening. Pete's a former coach. I'm a former coach. And believe me, we had opportunities to work the officials, and you better believe that we did it. And we read you as soon as you walk on the field as coaches. So remember that you're setting that tone as soon as you step out there. All right. Jose had a good point about changing positions, right, to best explain a foul. So oftentimes never fails, right? Everything happens to the single side. And if you have to come over and explain it, then let the single take that trail position and switch sides with him so he can give his explanation. Remember, mechanics really are strong suggestions, but they can always be adjusted to meet the moment. All right. So do what works best in that particular moment in that particular game. All right. Does anybody want to open up their mic and offer any pearls of wisdom that works for them? All right. The one thing that I will add real quick is I think if there are two people that rise to the top as far as game management in our association, and that's Pappy and Pete Buchanan. And it really is the ability to referee with a smile on your face and maintain that calm composure all the way through. And it's difficult for a lot of us, right? Difficult for me, difficult for a lot of people on this call to do that. And I think as you learn to do that and enjoy it, it really goes a long way to controlling difficult situations, which happen. So anybody else want to chime in with some pearls?
Yeah, Marty, I will just share this with you. One thing I have had to become conscious of personally, right, and this is a personal evaluation, I call it the GAMS syndrome, right? The grumpy old man syndrome.
Right.
And for you guys, I'm in my 60s now. We have a lot of officials in the 60s. But if you do 2 games and you go into your third, I always make sure that I get something to eat in me. I always make sure that I try to show up at that third game in a better mood than I did for the first game. And some nights that can be challenging. So I try to always tell myself, avoid the grumpy old man syndrome.
Yeah, and that's tough. And we've talked about that before with pre-games, right? The luxury of having that 2-hour pre-game at a Division I game that gets cut down to an hour at a Division III game that hopefully is 30 minutes on a playoff game that really is 5 or 10 minutes at your average game. So the reality of where your mindset is, make sure that when you're having those conversations, talk about the game and save the catch-up talk for halftime or after the game where you've gotten a little bit of flow going. All right. What else? Somebody else I think was trying to chime in there.
Yeah, Marty, this is Steve Holdridge. New to the organization coming from Pennsylvania, but one of the things I found out, especially yesterday when I ended up on the Virginia Tech Liberty game, is be prepared for everything. I ended up on a TV game, which was a first. And if you think about it, you're going to be observed at every single game because you're going to be on video for every single game. So, and I always look at it like I'm being observed at every game, and you always get a lot of good information. And the last thing is, I always ask my partners, especially newer ones, when I find out, especially the first years, is what do you want to work on tonight? That's it.
No, that's a great point. When you ask people what they want to work on, it allows them to focus. I always try to point out what my weak spots are, and what I need help with. So things like that'll really help us focus the communication. And a great point about pretty much every game is a TV game now, right? Every game is on video. One of the things, if you're not aware, is schools and teams have gone to these eye in the sky video contraptions that they use. If you've seen them, they take a much wider view. Okay, so we're really able to see officials' mechanics. And I don't know how to tell you this any other way. When I'm watching video and I see people, not hustling, it leaves an impression. And it leaves an impression in every assigner's mind when you're making certain assignments. Okay, just like it does when we see you hustling. Okay, so keep that in mind. All right. So Ken Meyer said about getting a huddle account. We're still looking at that, Ken. One of the challenges to getting a huddle account for the association is the aggregate space that we would use. Whereas, and what getting our own huddle account does is gives us the ability for you to go in and look at your games, much the same way it happens at the college level. All right, but it's not cheap. Okay, it's not cheap. It would be somewhere between $3,000 and $5,000 a year. That was one of the thought processes, and one of the motivations where you heard John Haid mention about possibly raising the dues because of that. All right. Right now we have access to a lot of teams' huddle accounts as assigners, and then we can go and look at video and pull it if we need to. But again, the storage is always the trick with the huddle or any service account. All right. All right. Pete, wow, that was a good game. All right. What are we talking about? I guess we're talking about the Virginia Tech game, right?
Probably.
Okay.
I'm just trying to figure out, I gotta look at it again, find out where I screwed up.
Yeah, I noticed that we had some people down there. Our resident photographer, who's one of our former officials, who is now coaching at Chantilly, ironically enough, was at that game, and he threw some pictures up from that game. So apparently that was quite the game. So a lot of good MCLA stuff going on out there. So, all right. Any other questions, comments, anything for tonight?
Yeah, Marty, I got a comment to add on.
All right, this is Rob talking, guys. Go ahead.
Yeah, helping talking about again, communication and professionalism. One of the big recommendations I have is ref out there whenever you speak like nothing bothered you. I know Sean Murphy's in the he talks about it in the U.S. lacrosse presentations and stuff. Don't get overly excited even when you see a big hit. Don't raise your voice, don't raise your ire or anything like that. Everything stays calm, cool, concise, and collective. Once you start raising your voice, you start giving the appearance that it affected you personally. And then any other call you make on that team, the coach, you bring in the possibility of the coach questioning that call. So that's pretty much it. Just keep it calm, clear, and concise.
Yep, and a lot of these things are just simple experience. They take time. Yep.
Now, Marty, I think I'll share with guys. My dad was a longtime football official on Long Island, and my brother Bob and my other brother Paul and I used to hold the chains for him. But my dad used to always say, if you go on the field, he goes, make sure you treat the coaches and talk to the coaches like you would talk to me, your father, right, with the same respect level. And he said, if you treat the players like you would your brothers, he goes, generally that's going to work out for you. Right. Now, there are some nights where the coaches and the players get a little bit rough, right? And I wouldn't want some of the players who are saying things to other players, right? You got to bang that guy when he immediately gets out of control, right? A player, especially if he MFs another player or if he says anything derogatory to another player. But that's a pretty good place to start the evening, right? Especially with the head coaches. I always remember that the head coaches are putting out a ton of time and not getting paid a lot to coach these players, right? So I always try to be respectful with them.
Yep, that's a good point. Most head coaches will walk away with less than $2,000 in their pocket for the season. They get a very small amount of money to pay all their staff, depending on where you are. One of the things that came across my desk earlier today was the list of coaches, and I think I counted at least 5 new head coaches in the Occoquan and Northern regions, which is basically Fairfax County. So we know there's going to be a lot of new coaches out there. All right, try to get a feel for where these guys are in their coaching careers sometimes, and we'll give you an idea of what to expect. We know that newer, younger coaches are a little bit more harsh on officials because they think that's a way to win games, and sometimes you have to coach them through it. All right, let them know that they'll communicate. All right, can we share the list of coaches? Sure. Yeah. Yep, they should all, most of them should be identified through Arbiter. Okay, but we'll have to go through and update. All right, one last thing about Arbiter. A couple of you have mentioned like 0 game fees and things like that. Don't worry about the game fees and stuff in Arbiter right now. That's an administrative thing that we generally worry about after a signing's done before we do billing. There are a lot of little tricks in there as far as making sure that they're all correct. And it takes it's a very detail oriented task that all assigners have to take care of before we kick out our billing. What we typically do is we'll reach out to you and ask you if anything looks off and let us know. And we'll get that corrected. All right. Because with all the games that we have in there, sometimes we miss one or two. All right. So be patient on that. All right. Any other questions, comments on this topic?
So the
Marty?
question, I'll let you go.
All right, Trevor. Yep.
There's a comment about first year. What are you expecting us to come to the field and say, hey, I want to work on something? I know that this is my first year. I know there's so much I need to work on at the high school level. Choosing one or two things, I'm really looking to the mentors that are at the field to really guide me, because I understand there's so much after coaching I need to learn.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Trevor, there's a lot you're going to bring to the table as a coach. First of all, that's going to be one of the key things that'll help you is being able to communicate with coaches. That's a big advantage, having been a coach. One of the challenges for coaches is that you think like a coach when you're out there on the field sometimes, and you get caught watching the game as opposed to officiating it. So discuss with your crew, and this goes for anybody, discuss with your crew, what your particular weak areas are, what your focus areas are. And everybody should have a couple of those every year that they want to get a little bit better on, and just have that pregame communication and get everybody on the same page. All right. Don't be afraid to be a little self-deprecating, especially if you're new, and ask for some guidance, and people will help you through it. All right. So we are a team, and the referee, don't get caught up in who's the referee. He's simply the guy doing the coin toss. That's it. All right. Everybody is on the same page once you get out there on the field.
Hey, Marty,
Yeah.
the pregame should start at least a day beforehand, because you need to contact everybody. And I try to make sure I have them on my text. So that way, if I'm running late, they're going to know about it ahead of time.
Yep, that's correct. And we'll go over a lot of that stuff in one of the later meetings, what the expectations are with regards to those kind of things. But that's 100% correct, that we obviously want to be in touch at least 24 hours ahead of time, primarily to find out what you're going to wear and when you're going to meet. Okay. And if you have any issues popping up, and remember, if you don't hear from your crew, if you don't hear from your crew chief, from your referee, then reach out to them if you have not heard from them. All right. It's a group effort sometimes getting that stuff out there, but we'll go over that stuff in detail. All right. For those of you guys that don't know what the overall calendar is, tomorrow is the beginning of practice for all the public schools. So everybody starts tomorrow. They're obviously blessed with some great weather this week. I think it's going to be 75 degrees on Thursday. All right. So they're looking forward and excited for a good season. And, but it's going to be interesting to see what happens this year. I think we're probably looking at all the champions coming from out of our backyard again, but we'll see if anybody's got any surprises from outside the area. But we've got to be ready for a good season, stay healthy. Okay. Keep yourself in shape as best you can, and make sure you get some rest in between games. There's going to be a lot of games to work. There's no doubt about that. All right. Bill, you got any final comments for us tonight?
Yeah, a couple of things related to timeouts, and a comment that Pappy made I've heard made and probably made myself over the many years that I officiated, when the coach says, I'm the only one that could call timeouts. And in my humble opinion, the rules don't allow for that. If one of the players on the field chooses to call a timeout, you're bound to call it. Now, so we turn that around. If the coach is, wants to be the guy calling the timeouts, and he needs to make sure his players and assistant coaches understand that's the deal. And related to that also is, and I haven't heard anybody do this in a long, long time, but used to be that a coach would say, if you were nearby and the ball was being contested and it was loose, when I come up with the ball, I want a timeout, and that would be assisting the coach and coaching his team. So the response was, if you had a chance to make it to him, was, Coach, when you get the ball, call your timeout. I'm not calling a timeout for you, that kind of thing. So just a couple of little things, related to that. I mean, I don't know. I'd appreciate your feedback on, someone saying only I'm going to call the timeouts. I mean, I don't know how we all look at that. We should be consistent. I know that's important. So.
Yeah, I think what Pappy was referring to is just the coaching staff as far as that goes, because I believe the rule actually says the head coach or any player on the field is what it actually says.
That's what I was kind of referencing. Yeah, so I'm just trying to be sure we were aware.
Yeah.
So.
And it's tough when
guess
we hear
I-
that timeout call. We're not going to turn around and look and make sure that it was actually the head coach in most situations.
True,
So,
true, right.
Yeah, Marty, you were accurate there. My comments were primarily with respect to the coaches. So a few years ago, when I was doing the chief bench official, right, for the state championship, and Canyon McRae was the head official, and Canyon was like, Pappy, I want you to be really cognizant of timeout. So Kevin Broderick's team was playing in the state championship, and they had, of course, Chantilly had about 8 assistants at their time. And Kevin Broderick made it clear to both Canyon and myself that I'm the only guy calling them. So he said, I'm the only coach that's calling them, right? He said, because my assistant coaches will call it every time a kid gets stuck on the sidelines. And he said, I want to reserve my timeouts for the last 5 or 10 minutes of each half, right? So that was the discussion we had with him. If a player had called timeout and the player was on the field, I think Canyon would have called it, like you just stated.
Yeah,
mhm. Which is rare, which is legal, but it's rare.
yeah,
Don't see that
it's rare.
happen too
It
often.
is rare.
So,
You have
When I
more of a
catch a
chance
kid-
of running into that in a collegiate situation than you do the high schools.
Well, if I catch a goalie not wearing a mouthpiece, I always ask him, would you like a timeout right now, or would you like a penalty? And it's amazing how they'll go for the timeout. So it's
Not much of a choice.
a good way to game manage during a dead ball.
It certainly is.
Yeah. All right, guys. Thank you again